All right, hello everyone. Welcome to my channel. This channel is for educational purposes, and we look at great theories, concepts, and discoveries that you might not be familiar with, things that have been suppressed, the powers that be don't want you to know about, and um, these are things that could really change your life, improve your spiritual, mental, and physical health. And so they've been marginalized, and you have to do some digging, but we try to hold your hand or help you out with your digging a little bit, get you started, get you on your quest. And this is another Bible Decode, number 452, I believe. And we've looked mainly at the New Testament, and primarily have highlighted the Roman origins hypothesis for the New Testament, and that is that the Roman Caesars are the true authors of the New Testament. The story of Jesus is entirely fiction, and it was created by the Romans as a psychological operation against the Jews. The Romans were masters of strategy and psychology, and they also were masters of creating religions. And they had a very clear motive to mellow out the Jews, who had been a big pain in the butt for the Romans ever since they uh, occupied Judea in 63 BC, so for over a century, which culminated in the war that broke out between the Romans and the Jews in 66 AD. And the two generals who prosecuted that war for the Romans were Vespasian and his son Titus, and they eventually became the new emperors. Starting in 69 AD, Emperor Vespasian um, came in and was the first of the Flavian emperors. And then um, a Jew who defected to the Romans and then was subsequently adopted by Vespasian and became a member of the family called Flavius Josephus, was appointed as the court historian or one of the court historians, and wrote a 7-volume work called War of the Jews in the 70s AD. And um, if you check that out, you will find that there are unmistakable comparisons, parallels, parables, satires, parodies between War of the Jews and the New Testament. They were both written by the same people at the same time for the same reason, as part of an intertextual um, piece of literature. The, the, the two works are intended to be read together, and when read together, they provide amusing coded messages that I'm sure the Romans had a good laugh about, because most of it is at the Jews' expense, ridicule and mockery, derision, and accusation against the Jews, who the Romans couldn't stand, because the Jews saw themselves as a chosen people, separatist people, and the Romans just wanted them to blend in and assimilate just like all the other nations of people. And that's kind of why the Romans wrote the New Testament, and that's why it's in Greek. Um, Now, in addition to writing the New Testament, while the Romans were writing the New Testament, they borrowed from all kinds of mythological and slash religious sources that were extant at the time, um, from ancient India, China, Persia, Japan, Egypt, Samaria, and Judea, as well as Greek and Roman mythology and religion, and the mystery schools, pagan mystery schools, um, a lot of astrology, numerology, shamanism, magic, all represented in the New Testament. But also, the Romans, in addition to creating the concept of Jesus, they also created the concept of Satan, which does not appear in the Old Testament. There is a Satan character, a Satan word used in the Old Testament a handful of times, but each time it refers to a human being who is an obstacle or an impediment. And the Satan in the New Testament takes on a more of a supernatural character, um, a kind of a rival to God, um, as opposed to an assistant of God as he was in the Old Testament. And then that gets amplified over the years, up to today, where we have the caricature of Satan, the red character with the pitchfork and the flames. And this is all part of a fear mongering technique that the priests use to convince you to go to church so that you tithe and so on, and um, prevent yourself from going to hell. But none of these concepts are real, and they are frankly juvenile. And if you believe in any of this, you should be ashamed of yourself. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't spirits or ghosts or, other kind of paranormal things going on. But to attribute it to the kingdom of darkness, who is presiding over a interminable hell that you're going to be consigned to if you don't believe in Jesus, it, you can't. I can't take you seriously if you believe that, because you just have bought into the world's greatest psyop. Um, okay, now what we're looking at today is a book from Kersey Graves that he wrote in 1865 called Biography of Satan. And this this time we are about to start chapter 13, which is called The Christian's Devil, Once Imported or Borrowed. We have stated in a previous chapter that the primitive Jews did not teach the doctrine of future endless punishment. They evidently knew nothing of the doctrine until after their exile to Babylon, as we do not find the doctrine taught in any of their writings penned previous to that era. The first traces of it are found in the lesser or later prophets, now termed apocryphal, and the Talmud or Mishnah, written but a few centuries prior to the Christian era. Um, Now, as far as I know, the Talmud was written in a few centuries after the Christian era. I don't know what the state of the scholarship was back in 1865 when Kersey Graves was writing this. Maybe it's changed. Um, but as far as I know, the Talmud is like 2nd to 6th century AD, um, both the Babylonian and the Jerusalem Talmud. Okay, and from these sources, in all probability, the founders of the Christian religion derived in part, their doctrines and traditions on this subject. Though we find the after death primitive doctrines of the New Testament are an admixture of Babylonian or Chaldaic, Egyptian, and Syrian traditions on this subject, and all conform approximately to the still more ancient Buddhist doctrine of future rewards and punishments. The Egyptian devil was a huge monster, panoplied with horns and shod with hoofs, a formidable tail of unmentionable, if not immeasurable, length, which we suppose served as a kind of rudder as he flew his giddy rounds amongst the sons and daughters of men. Though it appears he doffed his tail for the convenience of inserting his legs into a pair of breeches, that he might join the respectable society which he accompanied as they went to attend a picnic at the house of Job in Chaldea. We frequently hear of instances spoken of. Now, interestingly, I didn't note this, but the Romans did interpolate and write, actually flat out write, a few of the Old Testament books as well, and that includes the book of Job. Um, so that has to be taken into consideration where they're talking about Satan in book of Job, that this is also a Roman document. We frequently hear instances spoken of a descent from the sublime to the ridiculous. But here is a case of the ascent from the ridiculous to the sublime, presented in the account of Satan's becoming a hail fellow well met with the sons of God as they journeyed to make an important negotiation with that servant of the Lord, Job. He must have felt honored and exalted in the highest degree by such a peculiar favor being vouchsafed to his majesty. We have stated in effect that the founders of the Christian religion obtained their model for a devil from the Babylonians during their bondage in the country. It is well to remark, however, that Christians have invested his long-tailed majesty also with some of the characteristics of the Egyptian devil, as we find in the illustrated works of the early Christians. He is represented with horns, hoofs, and a rear appendage of lawless dimensions. We will conclude our answer to the question, where did the Christian world obtain their devil, by presenting an extract from an able writer on the subject who tells us, quote, the ancient Egyptians had a devil called Typhon, afterward engrafted into the Greek mythology as the author of evil. The later Jews, who became followers of Christ and the founders of the Christian system, admired the idea of having such a fearful, ugly devil, as he had horns, hoofs, and a tail, and hence engrafted his monstrous physical proportions onto the idea of a devil they had obtained in Babylon. At the same time, they gave him the malignant and ferocious character of Beelzebub, the devil of Syria, and thus the question is explicitly answered. Okay, chapter 14 is called The Various After-Death Punitive Terms of the New Testament of Oriental Origin. It only now remains to be shown that the writers of the Christian New Testament must have copied from the ancient pagans, as they have all their various modified forms or modes of future endless post-mortem punishment. In fact, the whole train of ideas and doctrines, apparently both of a devil and hell, which we find incorporated in the Christian scriptures as a part, seemingly, of the gospel plan of salvation, are found likewise in the pagan systems of mythology long antedating the inception of the Christian religion. The Bible of the Christian speaks of a hell of darkness in Matthew 8:22 and Jude 12, a hell of light, at least of fire, which must emit light. That's also Matthew 5:22. Hell in which both body and soul are destroyed in Matthew 10:28. A hell in which the soul is eternally punished, Matthew 25:46. A limited hell in Revelation 20:13, and also in 2 Peter 2:4. An endless hell in Matthew 18:8, an upper and a lower hell, and that's actually in Psalms 86:13. A hell or lake of fire and brimstone in Revelation 14:10, a bottomless hell or pit in Revelation 9:1, the keys of hell in Revelation 21, the chains of hell or the chains in hell, 2 Peter 2:4, and the gates of hell in Matthew 16:18. Now, an examination of mythological history will show that these ideas or conceptions are of pagan origin, together with the various scripture notions and myths appertaining to a devil or devils, such as his being the author of evil, his leading or destroying or punishing them, his taking up his abode in the minds or souls of men with his troop or train of inferior second-class devils or evil spirits, the saviors and saints casting them out of the temples of the inner man, their change of residence from the souls of men to the souls and stomachs of swine and other animals, also the various metamorphoses or changes of the devil in chief, by which he sometimes appears as a crawling or creeping serpent, then as a roaring lion, at other times as a flying dragon, and occasionally as an angel of light, etc., etc. Some of these notions or conceptions have already been traced to pagan origin. The origin of others will be indicated as we proceed to speak of the several pagan doctrines or myths appertaining to future endless punishment as compared with those found in the Christian scriptures. The Reverend Mr. Pitrot, in his work before mentioned, tells us the pagans believed that in their hell there were two principal abodes, an upper and a lower hell, the one expiatory, in which the common wicked were detained and tortured until they had expiated their faults and been purified enough to be admitted into the Elysium, or heaven, and the other, the filthiest, the darkest, and the deepest cavern, where great criminals were burnt and excruciated endlessly, and without any hope, cessation, or relief in their torments. The same author adds, according to Plato, the dead who have been guilty of murder, sacrilege, and other enormous crimes shall be endlessly miserable in Tartarus. Those whose crimes have not been so great shall be detained therein for a year. In the above extracts, we have the Christian Bible doctrine of an upper and lower hell, a purgatory, an endless hell, a fiery hell, etc. Again, our author says, the pagans believed that there was a gate to their hell, at which the Roman mythology, the frightful Tisiphon, watched day and night, seeking whom he might devour, and that Lucifer held the keys of the gates of hell. Here are disclosed several other Christian ideas of hell. The pagans believed that the deepest darkness reigned in their hell. Here is the Christian's hell of outer darkness. Speaking of Tartarus, the author says, there are incessantly heard the rattle of chains dragged by wretched victims, their groans, and the strokes of the lashes that tear their flesh. Here are the chains spoken of in 2 Peter 2:4. The Hindu Vedas um, informs us that Yama, the judge, delivers over the trembling wicked souls to evil spirits in order to expose them to be lacerated by demons or gnawed by fiery worms or plunged into pits of flame. Here we have presented the bottomless pit where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched. We might continue to trace out the parallel in every minute or every minute particular, but to present a full history or description of the numerous doctrines, notions, conceptions, or myths of the ancient superstitious pagans relative to the after death punishment of the wicked in hell, Hades, Tartarus, Infernus, Gehenna, Tophet, Sheol, or the fiery pit, with the various operations and machinations of evil devils, demons, dragons, serpents, satans, furies, evil spirits, or wicked genii, which were in vogue and currently believed in thousands of years ago. When the deepest, darkest, and direst superstitions envelop the human mind, a considerable portion of which we find copied into or rehearsed in the Christian scriptures, such an exposition would require a large volume. We will conclude this branch of our subject by two quotations from different poets, one pagan, the other Christian, and observe the similitude of their train of ideas in attempting to depict the underground world. Here the poet Virgil, 60 BC, at hell's dread mouth 1,000 monsters wait. Grief weeps and vengeance bellows in the gate. Fierce, formidable fiends the portals keep, with pain, death, and death's half-brother sleep. Here stretched on iron beds the furies roar, and close by Lerna's hissing monster stands. Briarens, and all around fierce harpies scream, and direful gorgons frown. Here rolls the roaring, flaming tide of hell, and thundering rocks the fiery torrents swell. Now, let us observe how successfully Christian Pollock has taken lessons in the pagan school of infernal ideas, and how exactly he makes the Christian theory of hell accord with that of the ancient heathen. Beneath I saw a lake of burning fire, tossing with tides of dark tempestuous wrath, and now wild shouts and wailing dire, and shrieking infants swell the dreadful choir. Here sits in bloody robes the fury fell, by night and day to watch the gates of hell. Here you begin terrific groans to hear, and sounding lashes rise upon the ear. On every side the damned their fetters grate, and curse mid clanking chains their wretched fate. I leave the reader to compare the effusions of the ancient heathen bard with those of the Christian 2,000 years later, and to determine for himself which is the most paganish or fiendish, the proposition which sustains or maintains the striking resemblance in the post-mortem punishment theory of the ancient heathen nations and those of the Christian Bible, written at a later period, is sustained by even Christian writers, of which we will present one proof. The well-known popular Christian clergyman Mr. McKnight, in speaking of Christ's parable of the rich man and Lazarus, says, "It must be acknowledged that our Lord's descriptions are not drawn from the writings of the Old Testament, but have a remarkable affinity to the description which the Grecian poets have given. They, as well as our Lord, represent the abodes of the blessed as lying contiguous to the regions of the damned, and separated only by a great impassable river or deep gulf situated in such a condition that the ghosts could talk from one to another from its opposite banks. The parable says the souls of wicked men are tormented in flames. The Grecian mythologist tells us they lie in Plagathon, the river of fire, where they suffered torments. He who hath ears to hear, let him hear how a Christian divine thus affirms to the truth of our proposition that the Christian's hell is a transcript from pagan tradition of heathen mythology. All right, that's the end of chapter 14. Chapter 15 is called The Doctrine of Future Punishment of Heathen and Priestly Origin, invented by pagan priests. And we'll check out that chapter tomorrow when we return. For now, that will do it. Thanks for tuning in today. Like, share, subscribe, comment, contribute, and share this around. Send it to your Satan-obsessed Christians and or Satanists, because their entire belief structure is totally fraudulent as well. And otherwise, come back for another Bible Decode tomorrow, and have a wonderful day.